Right, hello. And this is Sheriff Mack here on the other end, and mainly for our CC members outside of the United States who probably have only heard your name, they don't really know the man. And I'm deeply honoured to be able to talk to a sheriff who has really stood up, I think, for what's right. So, really, Sheriff, what I'd love you to do is just to explain a bit of background about why you got into the role of sheriff and how perhaps things have changed in the last year.
Well, thanks. And thanks again for having me on, Simon. I've heard a lot about you, and it's a pleasure to meet you for the first time, and at least sort of in person. And I would love to come to England and do a show live with you in person sometime. I've been there only once in my entire life, but I loved it. And so did my wife, and we would love to come back and spend a little more time sometime in the near future when this nonsense with pandemic is finally uh, quelled, and that the truth is will be guiding our lives again sometime. But that's really a good question. Why am I here? What happened in my life that brought me to be on shows all over the world? And one of the most prestigious is your show right now. I've heard a lot about you, and I've it's an honor to be with you. But I mean, the only thing that ever happened in my life that brought me to some notoriety across America and sometimes across the world. I've been interviewed uh, by Tokyo Broadcast System Network. I've been interviewed in London a couple of different times, Australia a couple of times. In fact, it was the ABC in Australia that actually came out to my home in Arizona. The Australian Broadcast Corporation, I think is what it was called. That's why it was ABC. And so, yeah, so I've definitely had those. And I've been on every major network in America, even including CNN a few times. Uh, but
Bless
I,
you.
yeah, right, exactly. Um, and there's been a lot of lies about me, but the only reason is because when I was a sheriff in my hometown of Safford, Arizona, I was like Graham Cracker, Graham County Sheriff for 8 years uh, during the late 80s and through the mid 90s. So I left office January 1st, 1997. I actually lost my third election. The sheriff is
Oh,
an elected position. I lost
yes.
my third election, and I can tell you why I lost my third election. And that's what's brought me to you. And 20, 24 years ago, actually 27 years ago now, when I was sheriff, I actually sued the federal government, and I launched a major lawsuit and fight against the Clinton administration.
Mm,
And the reason is twofold. There was two main reasons. They passed an act or a bill known as the Brady Bill, and the Brady Bill was a bunch of gun control, and they required uh, by statute or by an act. I'm not going to call it a law because a law denotes that it was proper. It
mm.
was not proper. It, it was a sham. And this was the first time in American history where a bill or an act was promulgated and aimed at the sheriffs of this country to enforce it. And it threatened. People don't believe this because it is so astonishing, but it threatened to arrest all the sheriffs of America if we didn't comply, if we just didn't bow down to the federal government and say, "Oh yes, I'll do whatever you say. Thank you. It's a privilege to serve you." No, I don't work for the federal government. There are proper jurisdictions and there are proper ways to make that sort of thing happen. The only way the federal government could approach me and say, "We would like you to not me, to sheriffs nationwide." There's 3,080 sheriffs in America. If they wanted us to work for them, they would have to negotiate a contract.
Mm.
And I already had a contract. many sheriffs already had a contract with the federal government to take the overflow of their prisoners into our jails. And they had to contract with us, and they paid us to take on such inmates for them. They can't just come to me and say, okay, now you're going to do what we say, because we just don't have the personnel. And until we get a national instant check by the FBI, you're going to do all the background checks and you're going to pay for it yourself. And we don't care what you say about this. And if you don't do it, we'll arrest you. That's really what they said. And anybody can look up the Brady Bill online and they can find that threat of arrest. I show it in all my presentations. I show the threat of arrest so that people know that I'm not making this stuff up, because it is so crazy. So anyway, I launched a lawsuit and I filed it February 28th, 1994. And then a few weeks later, Sheriff Prince from Montana joined the lawsuit, and 5 other sheriffs from across the country also joined the lawsuit. So there were 7 that did this out of 3,080 sheriffs in America. And I always wondered where the rest of them were. Why weren't they getting involved in this? And so I do know that there were a few sheriffs, one from Nebraska who called me, and he was Sheriff Nixon. And he said, I'm not going to do it. I want you to know I'm with you, Sheriff. I'm just not going to do it. I'm not going to comply. So if they ever come and arrest me, I hope you'll come and help me, kind of thing. So anyway, this case actually went all the way to the United States Supreme Court, and we won. Sheriff Prince and I ended up at the Supreme Court in December of 1996. And then the decision came out just barely 24 years ago. And it was June 27, 1997. So it took 3.5 years. And this controversy, this really became a huge controversy across America, but also in my hometown where I grew up. And I loved being sheriff. That was my favorite job. But I wasn't going to succumb to the illegal dictates and unconstitutional dictates of the Clinton administration. And I sued them on the issue of overreach and jurisdiction, and that they could not tell me what to do. I don't work for them. The people of Grand County hired me to do their bidding. The only boss your sheriff has is the people of his county. We, the people, are in charge of saying who works for us at the local level and at the federal level. We decide. And so this was the most miraculous case ever. It was the most powerful 10th Amendment. I sued on the 10th Amendment, states' rights and state sovereignty. Yeah. And it's the most powerful 10th Amendment decision in the history of America. And ever since then, I've been writing books and touring the country. And now I train sheriffs in the oath of office, in the significance of the oath of office, and other public officials, all public officials and police. And I believe that the best de-escalation training we can have is a knowledge of the Constitution and a working knowledge of fundamental civil rights, that our responsibility as police officers and sheriffs is to protect liberty, not just make arrests and make all these numbers and write traffic tickets and get all the drunk drivers off the road and put all the drug dealers in prison. Maybe some of that's necessary. I'm not saying it's not. But I will tell you this, we have gotten so far away from the principles of liberty that we hardly recognize what liberty is anymore in America, and I think across the world. And I will tell you this, liberty is for all people, of all nations, of all races, and all nationalities. Liberty should come first. And I don't care what leader hears me say that. I don't care if it's your prime minister, if you're king and queen, your parliament. I don't care if it's leaders and dictators throughout Latin America or Asia or the Middle East. Liberty for the people and civil rights and human rights comes first. And that's what we should be doing in America. And I believe we should be setting the example that liberty comes first.
Okay. And, when you won at the Supreme Court, how did the deep state then move against you?
Well, first they tried to make it all irrelevant. And the first thing that Clinton did is he had Janet Reno, the the Attorney General for the United States, he had her send a memo to all chiefs of police and sheriffs in the country. And they said, the NRA helped a couple of rogue sheriffs take a case all the way to the Supreme Court. And technically they won, but it really changes nothing. And we want all of you just to keep doing what you're doing. Completely contrary to the decision by the Supreme Court. And so I also want everyone to know that there were actually 5 Brady bills scheduled to be passed one year after another, so that 5 years the Second Amendment would have been completely gutted and destroyed. And that's no kidding. If you look back at Brady Bill 2 was actually proposed by a senator from New York State just 2 weeks after I filed my lawsuit. That was March 14, 1994. Howard Metzenbaum introduced that. And it did not get out of committee, never went to the floor because of our lawsuit. And then after our lawsuit, after 3 years, 3 years later, when we won, 3.5 years later, Brady Bills 2, 3, 4, and 5 never came up again. So we literally changed the course of history, and we saved the Second Amendment at least until now, when it's now being attempted to be destroyed again. But we altered American history, and it was just 2 small town sheriffs trying to do their job and to keep their oath of office to uphold and defend the Constitution.
Well, I think
That was one.
that's why
But it,
people respect you. I think it's
I
the
hope.
David and Goliath. It's the small man
Oh, it
against
was definitely the
government.
epitome of
Yeah.
David versus Goliath. I mean, just a small town boy from Arizona, and it was a small county, and so was Sheriff Prince. He was from a small county in Montana. But I will say, they have tried to go after me numerous times. They've pegged me as a domestic terrorist. And I will tell you, Simon, even in the 20 years that I was a cop and a sheriff, I never once committed an act of violence against another human being. I never shot anybody. I never beat anybody up. I never used excessive force against another human being or in any of my arrests. I was a school resource officer. I was also a detective, and I specialized in crimes against children. And I'm still astonished that law enforcement throughout the world is not uniting to stop human trafficking and the sexual exploitation of children and the criminal acts that happen against children in this world. And it makes me think that there's a lot of subterfuge and a lot of people in high places, like Bill Clinton, who make this to where we don't unite on this, and that we hardly spend any time. We spend a lot of time on supposedly stopping drug abuse in the world, but how much time and effort in law enforcement do we spend to protect our children from human trafficking and sexual exploitation? It just astonishes me how we're still even talking about such a heinous crime.
Well, I think the thing is that you obviously know more than you're going to say on an open line, but we both know that much of law enforcement is actually good. It's good,
Yes,
but the
yes,
problem is that after 50 years or so of rubber stamping the federal government or whoever it is, people in office forget their power, they forget their responsibility, and they forget what they can do, and they just want a quiet life. So I think the majority of law enforcement just want the paycheck, want the retirement, they like the respect, and
yeah,
they'll just do it. Now, there's a small group that are evil, as just as there is in any other organization.
yeah, of
The
course.
reality is that the deep state, I believe, has very cleverly taken over or subverted a range of arms of government, and child trafficking probably brings in more money than drug dealing.
I'm afraid you're right, and I will continue to stand against public corruption. I think Washington D.C. is so corrupt, and if God doesn't strike Washington D.C. down, then He owes Sodom and Gomorrah an apology. I really feel that way, and you talked about the spirituality of all of this. It is. our uh, responsibility to take care of our fellow man, and especially in law enforcement, to protect the most innocent among us. And that's another thing that I really have nothing but disdain for in Washington, D.C., are all the bureaucrats that go around and abuse citizens. And it's very similar to the Gestapo of Nazi Germany, of how, and I will say, when I said innocent, because we at the CSPOA, that's the organization I own, Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association, CSPOA.org. The reason that One of the reasons that we started was to stop the imprisonment and incarceration of innocent people in America, but throughout the world. And the people that they really seem to go after are the most innocent among us, and that's the Amish. And the Amish, as you probably well know, don't use technology for anything. And I will say there are different levels of Amish, and some do. Some actually own cars. Some actually own computers and cell phones. But even them, they're still very rudimentary and rustic, and they don't believe in electricity or blah blah blah. Most of them don't, but there's certain levels. But because I've
Right.
gotten to know the Amish, I've gotten to know the Amish very well, and I'm not Amish, as you very well can see. But the problem is we defend everyone, and we try to protect everyone from abusive government. And government has been very cruel to these people, and they've actually raided some of their food co-ops with SWAT teams uh, in front of their children. And this has been so exaggerated and so extreme and cruel. And we want government to be more responsible, and we want the IRS to be more responsible. And in fact, we don't even want the IRS to exist. They shouldn't exist. And they're constantly going after American citizens who have not committed crimes. But let me finish with the Amish. I've been involved with dozens of Amish people who have been abused by government. Vernon Hirschberger in Wisconsin, and most recently, a man by the name of Sam Girod, Girod, and he doesn't mind me talking about him because he got 6 years in prison because he failed to get permission from the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, to make a salve, just a lotion that people use on their skin. I still use mine. I still have some. I have it right here in my suitcase. And it just helps with lesions and rashes, and he made a claim that it helped also with skin cancer. Well, so what? I don't care. He never hurt anybody. I don't care what he did. If somebody wanted to sue him because his product was improperly advertised, I don't care. That's between them. They handle it. But he got 6 years in prison, taken away from his family, and I had to look in his wife's eyes because I was trying to help them, and I told him that I was going to do everything to make sure he didn't go to prison. Well, he did. And I went throughout the halls of Congress trying to get help from Democrats and Republicans, but mostly Republicans who claim that they support and defend the Constitution. I went to 85 different uh, congressional and senatorial offices in Washington, D.C. I remember it so vividly because the halls were so long, more than an entire block long. These huge offices where all these supposed leaders and public servants uh, have their offices and all their staff. And you talk about money and you talk about retirements. That's all they care about.
Yep.
And it was the Republicans as well as the Democrats. And I totally agree with one of the subjects that came up on tour, and that is that the Republicans and Democrats are mere wings of the same bird with the same old crap. Because there wasn't a single Republican, and that includes Senator Rand Paul, who was the senator for Sam Girod in Kentucky, and he wouldn't do anything to help this man. And while he was in court, he wouldn't do anything. And Mitch McConnell, the other senator from Kentucky, wouldn't help him either. And Tom Massey, who's supposed to be a real staunch constitutionalist, he wouldn't help anything. And I sat down with his wife and discussed this with her. And I called the senator or the congressman and went to his office. He wasn't there when I went to his office, but I left a message with all his staff. I've called him and called him, emailed him, and nothing ever happened. And then this really perplexed me, and it still makes me wonder today. I sent emails to the White House. I sent emails to all these different congressmen. I had dozens of emails and calls into Rand Paul's office, and I spoke with his chief of staff, and I spoke face to face with Rand Paul. Well, all of those emails got erased from my server. They were all disappeared, all of them, from everyone. And I talked to Jason Chaffetz, who was at the time, he's not congressman anymore. He works for Fox News now, and the word is he's going to run against Mitt Romney for Senate. Well, I sat down with him for a half an hour in his office. He was in charge of oversight. He's supposed to be addressing the cruelty of government and when they overreach of government. He never did anything either. And all these people, all they did was just give lip service and did nothing. Democrats, I spoke to a few, including Charles Schumer, but no one cared. No one did a thing about this. They don't care if innocent people go to prison in this country. And Washington, D.C., all they care about is filling these prisons up to where we are now the most incarcerating country per capita in the world. And it's all bureaucratic nonsense and corruption. And they should be spending time going after some of these more important crimes that I'm afraid too many of them participate in, and that's why they don't do it.
Well, I think the fact is that there was no votes in it for any of them. They would,
Yeah.
if it had been a school board or something like that, they would have been involved. So really,
I'm afraid you're right.
what you're saying to me, Sheriff, is that you have seen with your own eyes the depth of corruption that has for
Yep.
many years grown and grown, and
Yep.
now is boiling over the top of the pan.
Yep.
And I suppose for me, from as a Brit looking in, the only good thing from this is that now so many Americans are being forced to see this, and they're being forced to have to make a decision which side of the tracks they're on. And I will say, personally speaking, I'm greatly disappointed at the slow speed in which things are happening, and I would obviously clearly like things to happen faster. But people have
Well, the
been
only time it's fast is when they're making up stuff about COVID-19.
sure,
Then it's fast.
yeah, yeah. So I'm sure that things are moving very slowly in the right direction. But tell me a little bit about swearing in a new sheriff. I mean, how does somebody in America apply to be a sheriff? Because
Well,
remember, we
that's
don't know
really,
we don't know in Britain how you do it.
yeah, that's really different. The sheriff is the only elected law enforcement officer in the United States. In every state, the sheriff is elected. There's a few counties here and there that appoint the sheriff, but they did that just because the sheriff is so independent because he only answers to the people. He has no other boss or supervisor. It's just the people, and that's what makes us a constitutional republic. And the sheriff gets sworn in by a judge or some other person, but he actually does this for the people he works for. And in the name of God, he invokes the name of God and says he will keep this oath to uphold and defend the United States Constitution. And that oath is actually, you brought up the oath, that oath is actually required in Article 6 of the US Constitution. The founding fathers put that oath requirement in the supreme law of the land of America. And he or she must raise his or her right arm and swear an oath of allegiance to the Constitution, not to the president, not to the governor, not to some other group or committee. It's to the people in the name of God, so that we will perpetuate liberty in this country. And what I'm so perplexed about is how many people in public office believe they don't have to keep that oath. They are committing perjury and maybe even worse, treason, by ignoring or wittingly disobeying their own oath of office. And it is the subject that I've spent a great deal of my time addressing now. And we train law enforcement and sheriffs across this country how to keep their oath and to perpetuate liberty, even if it means standing against government bureaucrats that I already mentioned. We should be protecting the Amish from these cruel bureaucrats that are going after them and any other people. It's not just the Amish, but to me, the Amish is one of the stark examples of the cruelty of our own corruption here in the United States.
If an organization, no matter how far removed from federal government, has spent the last 50 years literally working out where the next mailbox is going to be and looking at the neighbor's fence, whether the picket line is 3 foot this way or 3 foot that way, and then suddenly to ask them to make decisions which is in their remit, but they've never had to. This is where the panic and the fear and I don't want to get involved. And it was very interesting to look at the situations with the audits in certain states in the US, where it was quite apparent to many people that those who had been elected didn't actually know what they could or couldn't do. They actually didn't know what their rights were. And that just shows how many years the deep state have been chipping away. So do you think, give us give us Brits a bit of a clear eye here. Is there a big change in America? Are more people becoming aware of the truth, or are there still millions of people asleep?
I think for the most part, of the majority are still asleep.
Yeah.
They drink the Kool-Aid, so to speak. They just trust government. And Thomas Jefferson warned us to never trust anybody in government. That the price of liberty is eternal vigilance. It's really hard to come to the numbers, a percentage of. But I will say this: um, I am so busy that I cannot even keep up with all of the requests. And many of those requests come from sheriffs themselves who are now waking up.
Right.
And I believe that most of them are waking up because the people in their counties are starting to wake up. And they contact the sheriff and they say, what are you going to do about the forced vaccination that they keep talking about? What are you going to do if they arrest me for not wearing a diaper on my face? What are you going to do if they try to shut our churches down again? Uh, you see, no one in government has the authority to do any of this. And I don't care if it's England. I don't care if it's Timbuktu, Tanzania. I don't care. It's in the United States where I live and where I've grown up. They don't have the authority to do this. I admit liberty is messy for tyrants. Liberty is messy for government. It's supposed to be. It's supposed to make it difficult for tyrants and dictators to self-appoint uh, themselves totalitarian power. They don't have that here. And there's no exemption clause and there's no exception to liberty. We're not allowed to destroy individual liberty or civil rights with the excuse of, I'm just taking care of you. This is for your own good.
Sure.
You should be doing what I say because I can take care of you. I know we can't take care of our own budget, and I know we can't take care of our own people, and we can't police our own police. But you should listen to me anyway because we know about your health better than you do. Well, that's nonsense. And personal health choices are exactly that. It's my personal choice. And no one in government has any right or authority to arrest me because I don't make my health choices how you want. And it's obvious that Fauci has been very confused and he's been all over the place on this. He has admitted to lying, but he said it was a good reason because he wanted to save masks for medical people. Because so he said, you're not going to have to wear a mask. He actually lied and came back and said, well, that was a lie because I wanted to make sure that medical personnel could get masks. That's just ridiculous. But he admitted lying. And I'll tell you another lie he told is back about a year ago. And I was watching this very closely. I wanted to see what they were doing to us. Um, and he was asked at a press conference, well, how long would it take to get a vaccination for this sort of virus? And Fauci said 2 to 10 years, two
Yeah.
to 10 years.
Yeah.
And instead, it took about 3 months.
Yeah.
And so, ridiculous for anyone to pretend or assume that this has been properly tested. And yet, the entire world governments are telling us that we should do this. Yet, 3 different presidents of 3 different nations, and I know 2 of them were in Africa, one was in Haiti. 3 presidents declined to participate with any of the COVID-19 rules, mandates, or safety precautions. And yet all 3 of those men ended up dead within just a few weeks of each other. And I don't think that was an accident. And this is astonishing that still we are allowing this sort of thing to take place. Why all the furor? Why all the hate and the disdain for people who won't get vaccinated? And I just don't. I'm not following this at all. And every time I try to follow it, it just comes up to more corruption, and more dishonesty. And so this is where I train the sheriffs to stand with the people, to protect the people's rights. And I'm telling you, we have a lot of sheriffs across this country that are really starting to wake up, and I'm proud to be working with them.
Well, that's wonderful. What's the relationship then between, say, a marshal and a sheriff? Because I know that some of the marshals, the U.S. marshals, have been used for law enforcement where the regular cops probably were under the orders of federal or other deep staters. So do you have any connection with them?
Well, there's 2 or 3 different types of marshals in America, and there's some state marshals. Some states don't have marshals at all,
Okay.
but some states do. But the federal U.S. marshals, I've worked with them in the past, but they still answer to the Attorney General of the United States. So I will tell you, I don't really trust that, because I don't trust the federal government at all on any of this. And the U.S. Marshals are usually after federal fugitives. And the bottom line with the federal government in its totality is that they have exceeded their authority as granted and delegated to them in the Constitution. And I think that's really the problem, is that they have unchecked power, unbridled power, and that no one is watching the bureaucracies. These bureaucrats really are the problem. And I would love to help train and work with federal agents, but they seem to be what I call Nuremberg officers. And Nuremberg comes right directly from, of course, World War II, where officers of the Nazi regime were put on trial, and they gave an excuse that I'm just following orders. And that didn't fly. They were executed anyway for crimes against humanity and for the genocide. Nuremberg officers today just, hey, I don't make the law. I just enforce them. I'm just doing what I'm told. As if there is an excuse for that morally. There's not. And we should wake up and know our history. But this whole thing has gotten way out of control, and we need to stand for liberty and protect the civil rights of the people in all of our countries. But let's start it here in the United States. I would love to see it happen in England big time also. But these kind of countries, England and America, we should be setting the example as to how to handle the COVID-19 in a responsible, caring, compassionate, and liberty-oriented viewpoint instead of the way they're going about it now.
Yeah, I mean, my own view is, the whole creation of the virus, and I do believe there is a virus,
Yeah, I do too.
uh,
I had it.
and I know that that was primarily designed to prevent Trump from winning. I had the honor, if that's the right word, of meeting naval intelligence a year and a half ago now, and this person was quite surprised that I had some information and said, "Have you seen the dossier?" I said, "I've not seen the dossier, but I've had it explained to me." And it was quite clear that the deep state have had a long-term plan to not just control the United States, but to remove any opposition. And you
Right.
think of John F. Kennedy, you can think of 9/11, we can think of all these key pointers where
Right.
um, potential opposition to a dictatorship was brutally crushed. And I think that we're now in a new ball game. My own view is more positive. I actually think that we're now moving towards a change in who's driving the locomotive. And
Oh, I pray you're right. And
well,
I've dedicated
you must
my
see
life
change.
to it. Well,
You
I do.
must
Oh,
see
I have.
change. Yeah.
Oh, I have, and I've been part of it. And I pray it continues. And I've dedicated my life to that proposition, that it is that people are waking up, and that there is a light at the tunnel, and that we can stop this and we can change it.
I totally agree. I mean, our plans, Becky and I, we're still coming to the United States. Originally, we were going to relocate to AZ. That was the plan because, of course, it was
Oh,
the
come on.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because Scottsdale was the HQ for Q,
Yeah.
and we were going to relocate there. And then, of course, the president decided that he wouldn't go to Texas and he wouldn't go to AZ. He would go to Florida. And then we had the COVID, so our plans changed. And what we're planning now, Sheriff, is 9 months in Great Britain and then 3 months in Florida. So we will be living in Florida January, February, March for the foreseeable future, and the rest of the time we'll be living in Britain. And that gives us a chance to, consolidate and build our membership in the US, which is
Wonderful.
very, very strong. And so, we'll definitely be wanting to visit you when we come out.
Well, I would love to. I would love
Well, you
that.
said
Thank
you
you.
wanted to come to Britain, so we'll have to do a reciprocal visit.
Well,
You'll have to come over here
well,
first.
well, I could definitely get to Florida a lot easier.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, you sure could. And of course, it was really amazing because we didn't understand. We were looking at the West Coast, not where Mar-a-Lago is, but the West Coast. And we didn't understand because in Great Britain, you have tides, and the tide can be 30 feet up and 30 feet down. And of
Yeah.
course, that's not the case in Florida. And we're looking at all these houses right by the water's edge and thinking, why aren't they all washed away? So we've got a lot to learn. But we love America. We love the American people.
Sure.
And we're certainly keen to be involved in what I consider is a fight back. I actually call it the fight back.
Yeah.
And I am heartened by the way, what I would call average people have actually got off their backside, as we say in Great Britain, and are actually now wanting to get involved. And in many ways, it looks back to the 1950s, where your
Yeah.
communities actually were involved.
Yeah. I think that's a great comparison.
Mm.
And I think this is the civil rights movement of today. And I would love to unite with all Americans in defending the liberty for each individual in this country. And I hope we can do that. And I believe this entirely of our mission to keep this peaceful and effective in protecting liberty. And if we get our sheriffs and local officials involved, we can take America back and we can restore liberty to America. And how do we do that? We do it county by county and state by state. It's not
Right.
going to happen in Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. is controlled by the deep state. It is the deep state. It is too corrupt, and they don't care about anything except power and money.
Mm.
So if we take this state by state, county by county, and state by state, with our sheriffs leading the way, with the people standing next to them, this movement will be successful. It will remain peaceful, and we will stop the violence that's going across our country, and we will restore civility unity and liberty to our country, because we start at the local level in our own communities, in our own neighborhoods, and we restore liberty county by county, one good constitutional sheriff at a time. And by the way, we hope that the people of England will join us in this holy cause.
Well, I think what is interesting is that while the mainstream media show nothing, people are sharing from their cell phones the videos, and we see both in America and Britain, and I do have to say other European countries, hundreds of thousands of people now demonstrating against their governments. We've seen that in Britain, we've seen it in a European country, France.
Mhm.
We know it happens in the US.
And I've
And
got a
so,
bunch of people in Canada trying to get on board with this too now.
right, okay, okay, okay. Well, you know, they've got a leader who's not very good, so I'm not surprised at all.
Yeah,
So I I do think there's change coming. I think it's a very exciting time.
it is.
I think it's very difficult and very challenging, and it's very, very frustrating when, you know, lots of people still refuse to see the real truth. But maybe that's what's got to happen. Maybe people have got to decide for themselves, and maybe it never be 100%. Maybe you'll only get 50, 60, 70%. But maybe the time comes when the two hands of the clock go to 12 midnight, and there is no more time for people to decide. You have to act now. So
You do.
I think it's about trying to gather the people now while the hands are not yet at midnight.
Yeah. And I will say that if anybody throughout the world wants to donate to our cause, if they want to become members, we totally invite everyone throughout the world to be part of this holy cause of liberty. And we invite everyone to participate however you can. And so let's do it
Well,
together. Let's do what we can, and let's stand firm in
Well,
this
what
cause of
I'm
liberty.
happy to do is you want to send us a link for your site, and then we'll put this on with the video.
Okay.
And there'll be lots and lots of people who can't physically be with you, but they
Right.
believe in what you're doing. So they'll send a few bucks to help because at least they know that they're doing something positive. So I'm very happy if you want to send me a link, and then I can arrange for all that.
I think Jimmy's already doing that and should have
Okay,
it to you any
that's
minute.
fine.
But it's just so everyone knows, cspoa.org. That's where you get all the information. You can make any donation, and we'd invite you to become members of our what we call the posse. And anyone in the world who wants to support the holy cause of liberty, we invite all of you. This
Yeah.
is this is for all humankind. This is for everyone in the world, and we hope that everyone will see the necessity of participating with us.
It is interesting. 3 years ago or so, somebody came here from the United States um, to have a chat with myself and Becky, and it's not a replica. It's a real sheriff's badge. I think it was a sheriff and not a marshal. And next time we meet, I'll show it to you.
All
And
right.
it's from Arizona. It's one of the counties, or states in Arizona, and it was presented to me because they said that this was the law enforcement of old. Because you know how much I love the Wild West. You see,
Sure. Yeah.
not the cowboys and Indians, that never interested me, but the how the West was won. And so this was presented to me, and it's about how the sheriff had to choose whether he was going to throw his lot in with the gangsters or whether he was going to fight for the people of the town, and that really was what was honored in those badges, and so that's why it was given to me. And I will fight because I don't know which state or which county it is, but I'll find it from when we
Okay.
next meet, and
Well,
I'll hold it.
there's only 15 counties in Arizona, so I would
Okay.
be interested to know which one. But
Well,
uh, and
I'll find
and
it.
I should have something similar for you when we meet.
Oh, how wonderful! I mean, I know it's original because it's all pitted. You know, it's been used. It's a good, what, I don't know, 50, 60, 70 years old. It's a
Wonderful.
original piece. Listen, I'm going to wrap it up now. It's the first time that we've met in this lifetime. Let me put it
Yes.
to you like that. We share 100% the same values and ideals. We don't disagree on anything. And it's just wonderful because we don't, what do we say in Great Britain? We don't beat around the bush. I don't know what you guys say, but the
That's good.
audience,
That's perfect.
what will happen, is that the audience can write into us with questions. So can write me questions for you, Sheriff,
Right.
and I'll go through them first to make sure there's nothing there that's naughty. But there'll be questions there that genuinely people are interested in, and it would be really helpful, because what I want to do is I want people to understand that uh, it, yes, you're a brave man, but we can all be brave. And
Yeah.
it's no good just one man standing up there saving the town. That man needs loads of other guys behind him, so that
Right.
it's not just one person. And what I wanted to do was to support your movement, support your belief, and connecting consciousness. Of course, we've got, you
Thank you.
know, a large number of people in the US. And when you were on the tour with Robert David Steele, you would have met a lot of my members uh, when we were stopping off, my Connecting Consciousness members. And they've
Yeah.
obviously sent me the pictures that they took of you speaking. And we get reports, of course, on a monthly basis of all the states and where you went. So we've been following you, although you didn't know that. So that's excellent. Listen, God bless to you. Thanks very
Thank
much. And we really do, look forward to having regular talk with you. And I think that I'm positive about the future. It's just a very rocky road at the moment.
you. It is. Thank you so much. And amen to what you said. Thank you. Thank you very much.
God bless to you. Thanks for all you
You too.
do. Speak to you soon. Lots of love.